First of all, Susanna, Nancy, Kathy, all the folks who invited us here, way to win. You can get me to fly across the country for this level of sun, for this campus. This is actually my first time on Stanford's campus as well, and it's just beautiful. And so thank you for inviting me and our team and just setting a stage for a great day. We came in and everyone was hugging us, and I was like, I can't think about the last time we walked into a room and there were just outright hugs, but for the right reason. I will get yelled at a lot if I do not acknowledge my high impact tutoring team. And so Sarah and Alethea, and where's Jess? Those three individuals alone manage a $33 million investment, and we are on track to exceed serving over 15,000 students in the district. That's more than 10% of our student population. I'd be remiss if I did not also acknowledge someone who has hired me multiple times to work with him. As you were reading my bio, where are you, Michael Duffy? Michael was my boss at the New York City Department of Education, and then we opened a lot of schools designed around high impact tutoring through the Great Oaks Foundation. And sometimes life comes full circle because the Great Oaks Foundation is one of our tutoring partners in Washington, D.C. And so Michael and Jean Lombardi, where are you, Jean? Thank you all so much. Many, many years ago, before high impact tutoring was all the rage, they were designing schools and serving children. And last but not least, the National Student Support Accelerator. Fun fact, they are our research partner. And when you stand up an investment of that size, it's great from day one to have them by our side. You won't hear much more from me than saying this, but my good friend, Secretary Romero, we defend the money that protects the investment so that the innovations can happen. And we just had our budget hearing, and on the literal day of my budget hearing, where we are advocating for an additional $5 million investment to continue high impact tutoring beyond the pandemic, our research partner, unbeknownst to us, issued a press release showing that there's a positive correlation between student attendance and students that receive high impact tutoring. And so I just want to ground you all as we get into this conversation. The space that exists between research, policy, and practice is so very real as you're trying to literally shift mindsets around what's possible for children. I've always believed in high impact tutoring because for me it's truly an equity issue. Children who have always had access to more will always have access to more. And in the district particularly, we know that children who have never had access to a tutor have it now. And we've reframed what this intervention is. It's actually not a pullout. You've done nothing wrong. This is getting children, all children, to know that it's okay to need more help. It's okay to talk to a trusted adult. It's okay, and many other children that you may have thought are smarter than you, or they just have had access to things you haven't had access to. And so I will not list all of our partners because I'll get in trouble because many of you are in the room. But truly, thank you for engaging in this day, and thank you for allowing me to moderate this conversation. I'm going to go ahead and get started. I have a lot of questions and not a lot of time, and I don't want to get in trouble. The objective of this part of the conversation is to shift from a state level and really drill down on how this is playing out in districts. And we're excited that we have presenters and conversationalists today, both from rural and urban places. They're going to talk a little bit more about how this is playing out in their context. If I'm good at my job, there will be time for Q&A, so get your questions ready. And the goal of this is really to think about how we can adapt their learning, their processes around student engagement, student growth, and overall student well-being. I would like to start with Tamara. How are you? We're fortunate to have Tamara Acevedo. Did I get it right? Tamara Acevedo.
Yes, very good, very good.
You gave me the last name and not the first name. She's the Chief Academic Officer for the Colorado Springs School District 11, who's with us. Tamara?
Yes.
Tamara has 27 years of education experience, serving as an educator, a mathematics content specialist, a mathematics curriculum coordinator, assistant principal, principal, instructional superintendent, and deputy superintendent. Can you take a minute and tell us a bit more about how your district is approaching tutoring?
Absolutely. Our district has been approaching tutoring by creating department, an expanded academic learning department in system. As part of that system tutoring, we approach tutoring in three main ways. One is through in-person tutoring. We do that in both literacy and mathematics. The other is in virtual tutoring, and that we have connected to outcomes-based contracting. In fact, in the coming years, all of our tutoring will be under an outcomes-based contract. And then lastly, we do take on tutoring where we grow our own. So we train and ensure consistency in our implementation with teachers that are District 11 teachers that we built out, and that is K-12. Our main, the thing that I'm most proud of in the work and where we're seeing the most gains and growth is that connection to our approach with outcomes-based contracting. Again, that is where we're headed, and that is our approach.
Great, thank you so much. Now, Matt Barrow is the Director of Differentiated Learning for Baltimore City Schools. Is that what Sonia? She's my fave. Leading the district's MTSS Gifted and Advanced Learning and Tutoring teams. During his 14-year career in city schools, Matt has served as the district's tutoring coordinator, MTSS coordinator, and most importantly, a middle school social studies teacher. Yes, I am very biased. Can you tell us about how your district is approaching tutoring?
Yeah, definitely. So we actually started implementing a tutoring model in 2019 before the pandemic. So we had some early experience with it. So once we had the huge influx of ESSER money, we kind of had the muscle memory centrally to know what do we need to do to manage this work, because we went from one small pilot in one network of schools to ESSER funds, full district-wide K-12 implementation like that. So it was a very rapid implementation, but having that experience, building a homegrown model, building the tools, building the guidance manual, like all the pieces, right, that need to be in place, that really set us up to be able to manage the work well once we made this big shift to a district-wide implementation. So we started with our homegrown model using paraprofessionals in K-2 foundational literacy. But then when we got our ESSER funds and dedicated a significant portion of that investment towards high-impact tutoring, we worked with a number of different vendors, every grade level, literacy, math, so really the whole gambit, virtual, in-person, hybrid. It's been a really interesting learning experience over the past couple of years, just really understanding what has worked well in our system and what has not. So we have a very large implementation. So on the previous slide, you saw our district is about 76,000 students. Last year, we were able to support just shy of 16,000 students in high-dosage tutoring during the school day. Again, that's in grades K-12. This year, as of my last check, Stefania over there, Stefania Ray is our amazing academic tutoring coordinator. She may tell me a different number, but as of last week, we had 14,114 students enrolled this year. And then the other piece is really our approach to it is building, investing in a central team to really manage and coordinate this work. And so really my direction and my drive with that team has been a laser focus on tutoring attendance rates to really measure implementation so they know where to go, where to follow up. And so we've seen the benefits of that. Our first year was around 53% implementation for attendance. We are currently around 80%. And so having that team, those systems, those structures to really engage partners, we've been able to build a program that's, I hope, really transparent and has really built a lot of trust between ourselves, our partners, and our schools. And so just really proud of the muscle memory that's kind of been built across the district and schools to do this work.
Thanks, Matt. And now Dana. See, I'm going to get it right. Dana Talley currently serves as the Chief Academic Officer for the Lincoln Parish School District. Prior to returning to Lincoln Parish, she worked for the Louisiana Department of Education for 15 years, serving as network leader, deputy network leader, network coach, and distinguished educator. Her primary role as network leader was supporting 34 parish superintendents, district leaders, and principals in the implementation of high-quality curriculum and aligned professional learning. Talley began her career as a high school mathematics teacher and debate coach, so maybe you'll bring some debating into the conversation. But can you tell us more about your approach with tutoring?
Sure. If we can look at the slide, yeah, here. First, I want to just start with, our proficiency goals right now are not something that we're satisfied with. With math, we're at 42%, ELA 50%. But just to share, and these are potentially unrealistic goals. I'm one that sets goals every year, and I generally get a 1 or a 2 on it, and my superintendent hasn't fired me yet, so that's good. But our long-term goal by 2026, I say long-term, I realize 2026 is like right around the corner now, but our goal for reading proficiency for K-3 is 95% by 2026, and you don't see that reflected here. This is 3/8 state tests. But our goal for actually 312, not just 3/8, in ELA is 75% by 2026 and 65% in math. So while we've made some progress, we've got a long way to go, and we've got a very short time to do it. So in terms of tutoring, so I want to start, and if we'll go to the next slide, I want to start first with math, mainly because I was a math teacher, and potentially I think math is superior in most cases. But
Wow.
ELA folks do not agree with me.
You see how that just happened? English teachers.
Yes, I'm usually alone with this, but anyway, like most all of you, I'm sure, our math proficiency decreased in 2021, and so then our K-5 math tutoring journey began. The program that we're using, we require students to spend an average of about 120 minutes a week, and what I think is important to understand is we're not just putting kids in these situations where they're getting this tutoring, but we're holding kids accountable for the tutoring, but we're also incentivizing the tutoring as well. And so, for instance, I send reports every week to my principals and my math coaches with the metrics from the prior week, so they can see which kids have reached the 120 minutes and the 4 lessons that we require. And so I think that's been an important part of our success with the implementation of this particular tutoring program. If you look at our data, year 1 of implementation, we went from 30% proficient to 34% proficient, so we thought, okay, well, we're on the right track. And then year 2 of implementation, we went from 34% to 42%, which was a bigger gain, but more importantly, we were above pre-pandemic levels, which is our expectation in Lincoln Parish. Now, if you pull out the middle school data here, the picture doesn't look as good. With middle school 6 through 8, we're actually not back to pre-pandemic levels. And then if you look at our students with disabilities data, you were talking about, somebody said not putting things out there. Well, it's out there. So this is our students with disability data, and it's unacceptable. And so we decided then for this school year that for math, we were going to expand tutoring to 6 through 8 because we've got to solve this problem and we've got to solve it now. In terms of literacy, I will say it took us a little bit longer for literacy. Our State Department of Education was really providing a lot of money for this, but I honestly was pretty reluctant. One, and I'll talk about this more in just a minute, but I just didn't find the right partner that I thought was a good fit for us, and I'm not one just to do something because someone tells me to do it. And so I took a little bit longer on that. Last summer, I was introduced to a tutoring partner and met with them, and I will just tell you right out of the gate, I was so impressed with the amount of time that they were spending with the tutors to really build their capacity and coach them. And also, they had a really specific way that they were going to make sure that tutors built really meaningful relationships with kids, and so that really, really mattered to me. So I thought, okay, well, let's give it a try. And again, I'm not going to just sort of, roll something out district-wide, short notice. I want to see if it works before we put a lot of money into it. So we decided to do a pilot. What we did was we didn't know where we were going to get the money, and so we ended up braiding district student services money that were set aside for tutoring and IDEA, early intervening services money. And we ran a pilot for 80 students at one of our largest K-2 schools. And then we got the data back, and you'll see it here, and in particular for kindergarten. And overall, the data was good, so I thought, okay, this is good. During our time this past fall working through this, we had just a really good relationship with the partner. Any problem that arose, They were willing to work with us. They came to the table and we solved problems. But here's the thing that was, and you're gonna hate that I'm saying that the overall data is not the most important thing here. But here's the most important thing to me as the district leader in terms of tutoring and the impact on kids. Teachers were telling me, because I was really close, I spent a lot of time at this school because I didn't want people telling me what was happening. I wanted to see firsthand what was happening. And teachers were telling me that kids were coming back to class and they were more engaged in the lesson. They were actually asking questions and answering questions. And then kids were so excited to go to the tutoring. We actually had a situation where when the kids would have to, it was a 20-minute session, and when the kids would have to end the tutoring session, we couldn't get them to stop. Like, they wouldn't quit talking to their tutors. So the proctor had to set up this protocol where when I tell you time, you're going to wave bye to your tutor and you're going to close your Chromebook. So what the kids did was they would start waving bye, and some would do, you know, the little heart thing.
In the hearts.
And they would be saying, I love you. And I would actually watch kids as they're closing their Chromebook bend down so they could keep seeing their tutor as long as they possibly could. That's what sold me. And so I went to the State Department. And since I worked for them, I felt like I could just go and do that. And I said, hey, I need some more money. And I've got some neighboring districts who need some money too, so I'm going to need you to give it to us. And they did. So that was, that's what's happened with literacy so far. So we expanded it to 5 more schools, the other elementary schools in our district, and we're hoping to see great results there as well. So last thing on this last slide that I'll share is, if we can just move to the next slide. Oh, there it is. Okay, thanks. We wrote in January of 2021, it was a new superintendent. I just came in as chief academic officer, and so we wrote a 5-year strategic plan. And 2 of the 4 priorities you'll see there, the first is, you know, strong core instruction using high quality instructional materials, and then the second, meeting individual needs of students. We don't do anything in my office without it aligning to those 2 priorities. And I don't know if you're familiar with RAND's Improving Instructional System Coherence Toolkit, if any of you have looked at that, but we take coherence very seriously in my district. We want coherence for principals, we want coherence for teachers, and we actually want coherence for kids. And so I don't want a kid sitting in a class doing work, getting up and going to the tutor, and then what they're doing with the tutor doesn't directly support the work that they're doing in class. Mm-hmm. The only reason that we tutor is so that kids can do grade level work. And so that was really, really important for us. And the last thing here is around sustainability. I'll tell you, the first day we received ESSER funds, we were already thinking about what we were going to do the last day we received ESSER funds. We always have a plan B where funding is concerned when it's something that is a priority for us, aligns with our strategic plan, and we think we're going to get, or we know we're getting student outcomes from it. So just to tell you kind of what we've done around that, we are going to use ESSER funds to fund the fall semester of tutoring this next school year. But for the spring semester, our plan A is our state has recommended a $30 million block grant in the MFP that's specific for high-dose tutoring that will be distributed equitably among districts based on the needs of students. So that's the first thing. There's also a partner bill that goes with that that will be more specific about the kind of tutoring you can offer, exactly what you can do with that money. But that's making its way through the legislature, so you know how that goes. We're not going to sit and say, oh, well, we hope that passes. We have a plan B. So in our state, the Louisiana Department of Education used to require that we take the top 3% off the federal monies that we received and use that specifically for tutoring. They're no longer requiring that, but in our district, we're going to still continue to take off that top 3% and require that our schools use that for tutoring. So that's sort of our story in Lincoln Parish, and was probably way longer than I needed to be, so I apologize for that.
Oh, thank you. Really quickly, are the Colorado Springs slides next? And if not, can someone pull them up? And And while that's happening, I failed to acknowledge City Tutor, and so Kat, where are you? Okay, wave your hand. Kat, City Tutor is the local nonprofit that supports our entire tutoring ecosystem in Washington, D.C. One of the strategic decisions we made in D.C. was not to run the program directly as a state education agency. We gave a sole source grant to City Tutor, and they very much support the lift of the great work that we do. Now, Tamara, it seems like people are looking, and they found the slides.
Great.
See how good a commercial works?
Wonderful.
Now, tell us a bit more with your slides around what's taking place in Colorado Springs.
Yeah, it's interesting. Colorado Springs, and I was the similar position in Denver Public Schools as the Deputy Superintendent of Academics there. This is my second full year in Colorado Springs, District 11. But Colorado Springs is actually the second largest city in the state of Colorado. But you wouldn't, it doesn't present itself that way because it's made up of lots of smaller districts. District 11 is the second or third largest district at around 23,000 students. So it's a very unique experience. You can see from the graph, we have some diversity. It is the downtown urban district in Colorado Springs, but we also have a very high population for the city of students and families that would qualify for free and reduced lunch. That's not listed there, but we've hovered around 45 to 65%. Right now, we're right around in the 60%. So we've put a lot of work in our plans to meet the needs of our diverse district. You can also see when my superintendent and myself came in, we've had pervasively low academic achievement, and so the numbers speak for themselves there. If you go to the next slide. This just gets, I gave you a little bit earlier, a little synopsis of where we're at with the 3 different areas that we're focusing on in tutoring. But because outcomes-based contracting is really where we're headed, this is the data very specifically from that program. And I'd like to recognize Hassan Ali, who is actually the vendor that we work with, Air Tutoring, for that outcomes-based contracting data. And you can see we've been focusing on 4th through 8th grade in the area of mathematics, much for the same reasons that my colleagues here have described. Within the pandemic, we saw great discrepancies with mathematics, and quite honestly, we haven't done an overall good job with mathematics as a nation, really. But you can see we've built up from the spring of last year up through now the number of students that we're servicing with outcomes-based tutoring, virtual tutoring. And what I believe is unique and very important about the tutors that Air Tutors works to attract and retain is that they're highly educated. And I believe all of them, but we can double check that, have certification in teaching. And they not only have those credentials, but they have a passion for educating and proven ability to do that in a virtual environment. That's really important. You can see the outcomes. They were strong when we started. And now we're above the 50% mark through 61%. It was really important that we put that data piece here because we have 3 different levels of outcomes that students can meet as long as we're meeting requirements of attendance and that they're getting the right number of sessions and that we're doing what we're supposed to do on our part in terms of implementing and having things happen and occur during the school day. But we wanted to break out, I wanted to break out here so you can see what we've done in the spring, 4th through 8th grade overall, because our middle school data, that's been tougher. And we're still seeing results there as well. I would also just say outcomes-wise, now in the second year, our spring to spring data, we use Star Renaissance, which is highly predictive with our state assessment. We have in literacy and mathematics right now shown a 9 to 11% increase in our data. I can't say that's directly connected to tutoring. It's part of the larger strategy that we have, but it's significant. And oftentimes you'll see districts go down to look at data from fall to spring because they see a dip in the summer. We have not seen that dip. In fact, we've seen gains. We had tutoring in the summer, and we had, as part of our expanded academic learning, a very robust summer program, so we attribute it to that. I don't know if you want to go quickly to the next slide. I'll try to really hurry, but I also just want to say we've used all of the resources. When I was in Denver, we had started with outcomes-based contracting, tutoring, the work of this great organization. And so we stick very tightly to those characteristics. And with the curriculum we use, with the ratio of students, we actually do 5 days a week. It's very, very rigorous. You can see our board priorities. We've focused in these last couple of years on student success and future vision. So that recreation of our strategic plan, you can see up in the right-hand corner. Like many districts, including the colleagues here, we're focusing on Tier 1 instruction, best first instruction, and having coherence in that. On the red side, those systems, developing that system of accountability and support. We put expanded academic learning, so the development of that department within that category. We focus on extended day, extended school year, and tutoring as part of that. So tutoring is part of a larger system, a Tier 1 system. We also use Elmore's instructional core model, which many do. But in terms of tutoring, everything connects to the core. So tutoring, we're focusing with students on the relationships. Our kids don't want to leave tutoring either. I like your idea of how you've allowed them to be able to do that, but they love the relationships that they've established with their tutors. So that engagement piece is important. With the content, it's all about providing access to grade level and beyond content. So while they are filling in and aligning with skills, every day that they're going to the tutor, they're addressing grade level content. And then with the teacher, that we have this unique relationship with the vendor. It's like nothing I've ever seen before. With the vendor, the tutors, they're part of our team. So that teacher component is the teachers are looking at data, they're providing some insight, the principals are doing that, and then they're connecting directly back to the coordinator, our vendor, Air Tutors, to make real-time adjustments on a day-to-day, on a week-to-week basis. So you can see how the instructional core fits into a tutoring strategy amongst a larger strategy overall. Yeah.
It's been amazing to hear from each of you and even think about our own context, what it looks like when you see it in practice, and how you could think that it'd be hard to make tutoring live and breathe inside a small system, large system, et cetera, but with the right resources, supports, et cetera. Even I've walked in classrooms and been like, what? Like, I was in one middle school classroom, 4 different tutors in 4 different grade levels, engaging in conversations, and the children were all dialed in. And so it's amazing to hear this practice across different places and see that we're not alone. I'm gonna ask 2 questions at the same time, and I want this to be of a conversation so you build on each other. It's been clear as we think about what drew each of us into tutoring, be it the pandemic, be it a vision for instructional delivery, or even the instructional core, and making tutoring be a part of that core. But when you think about implementation, We could stay here all day and just talk about implementation. But what are the implementation challenges that you're most proud of being able to overcome? How did you overcome it? And then the future. I love that folks have each said they started thinking about the end of ESSER before ESSER started. But how are you thinking about your instructional program long time, pathways to funding, materials, and how do you, I mean, if you were going to leave a district with something they should know about? So first question, what was a challenge that you solved and you're proud of? Second question, what are you thinking about when we think about the future? And Matt, I'll let you go first.
Sure. So for the first part, you know, especially going from a very targeted pilot to district-wide, the first huge challenge was just buy-in at the school level. You know, I think there was an early experience of principals, school leaders, people in schools feeling like, oh, what is this extra thing I have to do on top of everything else, because that is very real in schools. And so through the support that they were able to get, you know, from us centrally, from the engagement that our partners were able to provide, and to build those relationships, and to get now several years under their belts of actually doing this work better and better, you know, that initial challenge around buy-in it has completely shifted. There is much more widespread just really valuing of this work. The feedback we get from schools when we survey school leaders, when we survey students, when we survey pretty much all of the stakeholders involved, like year over year has just continued to be more and more overwhelmingly positive. And so I certainly attribute that just to a lot of the work that our central team is able to do to help manage those relationships, take the lift off of schools in terms of the procurement pieces and all the technical stuff. The other piece I would say is around our systems for how we started collecting implementation data. Not knowing what's happening is like trying to throw darts at a dartboard blindfolded while spinning around, right? But like having the right data and having that data visible over time, that really, really just helps us make implementation visible, so we know where to go, how to follow up, what questions to ask, what support needs to look like, because then we're not guessing, we know what it is. You know, one thing that, you know, I certainly say this all the time with my team, I think, and it's just this very simple idea of, you know, the idea that all students can learn, right? It's like, let's take that a step further and say all students will learn, because that's a different thing. And when we have the right data and we can see if the things are happening, then we're much closer to that second idea. So those are the two challenges that I think we were really able to solve for in our district.
And when you think about the future?
Yeah, so really, like I mentioned this earlier, knowing what has really worked well in our district, what has not. That's given us now several years of outcome data, of implementation data, of all these different metrics to really not be guessing, you know, these are the types of programs and models that work in our system. So now we're really well poised, you know, whether it is braiding together other funding sources or whether it eventually falls to school leaders to make decisions with their own budgets. We are able to give them really, really good guidance that we were not able to give before around invest your dollars in these types of things, in these types of programs and models, because we know that these are the things that have worked in Baltimore specifically, which is, you know, just like any system is unique to itself, right? And so having that ability to really give that clear guidance so that people can use their funds most strategically and get the biggest bang for the buck, like that's really like the core of sustainability, especially, you know, when we think about homegrown versus vendor provided. I will share this too. Our K-2 para model has actually been really, really high performing. And so like that's a different kind of strategic budgetary decision, you know, purchasing a person that lives in your building versus, you know, partnership, which both provide good outcomes. What we've seen with our K-2 model, for example, 70% of our kindergartners that were enrolled in that tutoring program, you know, they started the year at well below on dibbles. 70% of them were out of well below by the end of the year, which that far exceeded some of the other growth that we've been able to see. So just taking all these lessons to be able to give that guidance, like that's where I think we have a lot of benefits in place.
Yeah. Dana?
Yeah, so I don't know if you've ever been in this kind of a situation before, but you know, usually when I tell my principals and math coaches or other folks in my district that I need them to do something, they'll do it. And sometimes they do it and I don't realize the unintended consequences. So going back to math, you know, I wanted students to get 120 minutes on average, but more important, 4 digital lessons completed. And the catch with that is they're independent digital lessons. So the student is persevering, the supports are built in, everything that the student needs is there. There's a way for teachers to intervene, but it's not before there's an opportunity for kids to engage in productive struggle and that sort of thing. And so the first year, last year, we had tried at one school for 6th grade to implement this tutoring. And kids all got to, you know, 3 lessons a week. And so I was like, oh my gosh, like our data in 6th grade math is going to be fabulous. And it was horrible. It was actually a decline. So I called the people at the tutoring company and I'm like, we've got a problem. Like, I need to meet with you. And they asked me some questions, and of course, you know, it came back it was our fault. But what ended up happening was, when I talked to the principal and I talked to the math coach at that school, the teachers had heard Dana Talley wants 3 lessons a week. So by God, at all cost, even if the teacher had to sit beside the kid to help them get through the lesson, they did. And I was like, okay, well, that's not what I meant. Well, but that's what you said, but that's not what I meant. So I have spent the entire year retraining administrators and math coaches on what is appropriate support and not appropriate support during the independent digital lessons. And so that's something I should have anticipated that I was going to cause people to do based on, you know, how aggressive I can be sometimes. But it's certainly a lesson that I learned, and it's not going to be the same this time. Another colleague of mine was at one of the middle schools where we had to have these tough conversations about don't do the work for the kids, they have to actually do the work for themselves. And she said that the math teacher saw her, she was just kind of standing behind the kid, just watching them, not really doing anything. And the teacher like leaped almost across desks to get to her and say, you need to talk to Dana Talley, we can't help the kids when they're doing their digital lesson. She's like, I'm not helping the kids, I'm not helping the kids. So we may have gone now on the other extreme, which apparently is just a flaw of mine. So we're going to work on that. But that was a huge challenge that we faced, and I just went blissfully through last year thinking things were going to be good. So that's, you know, one of the biggest things that I think we've overcome. But
Tamara.
I mean, we've overcome a lot of things, but I think we've also been really successful too. I think like in coming from the spring time up until, so the first spring when we first implemented until now, I think the initial schools that we chose them because they had a high population of students. They were our priority schools that needed great intervention. But they were our priority in turnaround schools. The leader had a lot of different initiatives and support. And quite frankly, it was too much to implement. That's really, it's really important because, you know, it is pretty costly. You know, we worked really hard to get to the average amount per student. We had some tutoring programs that were a lot farther away from that. But it's still a great amount, even if you're thinking about $1,800 per student, that's a lot of funds to put into something. And so we looked, when we moved out of that semester, we looked very specifically at schools that had certain conditions. This is beyond what was you know, the minimum requirements or what we were identified by, you know, that we had gotten from NSSA. This was leadership. How many initiatives were they implementing at the building? They could still be a priority school, but did the leader have a plan that integrated tutoring into the overall scheme? When we did that, when we looked across the board at different schools, you can see in the data, you know, in the slide that I shared, that we saw a great bump, right? Because now they were able to partner in a different way. They weren't trying to implement too many things. We were looking at levels of leadership. So I think with limited resources, that was definitely a challenge we overcame. And I think that a second, like, smaller thing, but how you embed tutoring into the school day is really important. So we had to relook, you know, some schools that had done that, but where they had placed it, it was less successful. We really worked with them. What am I taking forward was the other question. Again, so many things, but I think we're moving outcomes-based contracting, like I said, to all of our tutoring areas. But one of the things I didn't mention, kind of a fourth area, our district gives money to individual schools to create their own tutoring programs. And so starting next year, we're gonna say you can create your own tutoring program, but you have to achieve outcomes and have at least 3 outcomes that you can measure. And if not, we're gonna take those funds away. So, you know, they have to be moving towards that trajectory. The other thing is, I would say, we are strengthening tutoring in the summer program, so during our summer time. So we're looking to expand that. So it's not only fall, spring, but also summer. So full model of extended learning across the system.
Does anyone have one really quick question? First hand, you got it. Yell it out, use your teacher voice.
Okay. Dr. Grant, I was really lucky enough to go to the DC Knit conference.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I mean, it was really inspirational, but one of the things that I was most inspired by at the conference was hearing from the principals, particularly, I think it was Akila, she was like a force of nature. Yep. It was fascinating to me to see the level of autonomy that those principals were given in DC. And, you know, even having 3 years in the case of Akila, for instance, to visualize scheduling, for instance, that would work. So in her case, that she could deliver high-impact tutoring, I think, to all of her students at her elementary school. So I'm curious to hear from, you know, someone in the panel to think about, like, how are you communicating with those principals, getting that buy-in, and how having them think almost long form about how they're going to get their staff to buy in to high-impact tutoring and fully integrating high-impact tutoring for the long haul.
Matt, you look like you're gonna.
Yeah, I mean, I can say quickly, you know, I think first, really being thoughtful about what's the front end guidance that we're in support that we're able to offer schools. So it's not as much as a lift for them to have to grapple with. So having not just examples of here's what a schedule could look like, or here's a way to organize X, Y, and Z, but also being able to provide that direct support, sit down next to people and like grapple with those things together. I think that's a part of it. And I think the other part too is just a general approach to this work and acknowledging on the front end that this is messy, it's new. We're learning still, and that's true for everybody. And so, you know, I think just being vulnerable in that space in the conversations we have with school leaders, with vendors, with everybody involved in this work, and saying, you know what, like, there's a lot we don't know how to do, but we're gonna work together to figure it out. I think that helps build the trust to get that buy-in. And I think that creates that foundation to be able to continue in the struggle to figure it out. Because our kids deserve to have this type of support. Kids in West Baltimore deserve to have this support every single day. And so, you know, whatever we can do to sit next to and struggle through and be partners in that learning to do it well, like that's the approach I think we need to take.
I mean, Matt, I could not have said it better. The introduction of this into our ecosystem, I would argue, is one of the most significant seismic shifts in what is taking place in the instructional day that I have seen, and I've been at this in 24 years, and it is the vulnerability and the trust in what Secretary Romero said around, like, this is outright not working, fix it next week, as opposed to 3 years from now. And so thank you for that, because our children in Ward 8 in DC deserve to have access to high quality instruction, and we believe tutoring is a part of it. Thank my fun guests and panelists for their insights, and thank you all for listening. I hope that we sparked some seeds. I keep thinking about the master schedule. Like if someone is like, what was your implementation challenge? I'm like, that damn schedule.
Especially in middle school.
But we fixed it. And so again, give a round of applause to my panelists. Thank you all.